The Fourth and Frames, the flagship fantasy football podcast here at fantasyandframes.com. I'm your host, Jorge Edwards. We got Drew Scott, we got Aiden Weingartner, and tonight we're back. We've been off for most of the season, but we're kicking off our redraft content right here tonight, talking about NFL free agency reactions and the redraft fantasy football impact that they're going to have. We'll be talking about different positions, different players, and pretty much since we're the last show on tonight, we'll pretty much talk about whatever the hell we want to talk about. And we hope you have a good time doing so. But we'll get to that right after this.
I think we might have lost Jorge. Oh, no.
I was going to say, I see a lot of like refreshing screens, and I didn't know if it was me or not. But anyhow, okay. We're back. I'm back. We're all good. Here talking about NFL free agency reactions. But, you know, man, it has been a while since all of us have been on screen talking redraft. Because, Drew, you've been joining us on Dynasty 365. Aiden, you've been leading the squad there, talking about the different rookie rankings at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, doing some mock drafts, and now here we are, man. We're back. Fourth and Frames redraft talk. So let's quickly go around the frames and just catch up with y'all. Like, for people who haven't been watching Dynasty 365, Drew, what's new with you, man? What's going on?
Man, not much of anything. I've been trying to keep the dynasty rankings up to date, getting myself up to speed on the rookie class. I don't watch a lot of college football during the NFL season, and so a lot of my time starts once the NFL season's over. So trying to get caught up on that, get up to speed on the dynasty lens, but really excited to be back talking redraft. I love dynasty. I think it's a blast, but redraft is still where my heart's at. So I'm excited to be back on here.
Very nice. Aiden, for everybody who hasn't been watching, you masterfully handle Dynasty 365. What has been up with you?
So obviously you allude to the fact hosting Dynasty 365. It's been a blast. Drew was on with the rookie rankings episode. Appreciate you coming on, Drew, and everyone that tuned into that. But number two, I've been enjoying just talking dynasty setup strategy with you and JT, but I'm also very excited to jump on the mic, if you would, tonight with Drew to talk some redraft and look at just the 2026 perspective from all these recent news and chaos that we have going on.
Awesome. Well, let's just get into it. Let's talk about some fantasy football news and notes, shall we? So again, we're going to talk about this from strictly a redraft perspective, and we're just going to give you some instant reaction to some recent news that has happened. And I think the most recent news that, I don't know about for y'all, but when that notification hit on my phone yesterday, the holy F, the censored holy F that I'm giving right here on a podcast streaming right now was not censored at the workplace.
Hopefully your son wasn't around.
No, I was at work, and it came out with a vengeance, and I had to duck behind a freezer and be like, nope, I didn't say that. Did somebody say that? It wasn't me.
Jorge, are you okay?
Exactly. Jorge's losing it, everybody. And I'm sure a lot of you out there were when Jalen Waddle was traded to the Denver Broncos. WTF? Like, who saw that one coming? I did not. But giving an instant reaction to the news, Drew, let me throw this to you. Are you increasing your expectations for Waddle for fantasy because of the move to Denver?
I am. Yeah, I think it gave him a bump up. I was a little concerned with Waddle's outlook whenever he was in Miami with Malik Willis coming to town. I don't really see that being a very high passing volume offense. And I think that, the jury's still out on how good of a passer Malik Willis can be, what his ceiling can look like. And even though I'm not the biggest Bo Nix fan necessarily, I do think it is a step up from what his outlook was going to look like in Miami. I expect him to step in and be the wide receiver 1 for Denver. I think that he'll be ahead of Cortland Sutton in the pecking order. And so I think that probably more of a wide receiver 2 for fantasy. I don't think I'll have him up in wide receiver 1 territory, but I like his fantasy outlook more today than I did whenever he was in Miami.
So, Aiden, I want to throw you this, approaching things from the opposite perspective. And Drew, you just alluded to this. We saw in Miami that Waddle could pair well with another top upper echelon wide receiver, Tyreek Hill, when he was, quote unquote, in still his prime. Now Waddle goes to Denver. What are your thoughts, Aiden, on what this does for Cortland Sutton's fantasy value? Does he now all of a sudden, because Waddle going to Denver for redraft in August when you're having your drafts, does this make Cortland Sutton more of a value, or does this kind of help, or does this hurt Cortland Sutton in this situation?
Yeah, I think that's the perfect word to sum it up, Jorge. Value. You just use there. Excuse me. I kind of, like, spoiler alert, kind of said it in my article and kind of wrote about the fact that while I am very much in on Waddle and still in on Sutton, I'm not, quote unquote, paying up for either one, if that makes sense. I am perfectly content with sitting and waiting and taking whichever one falls to me. And by all accounts, that's very likely going to be Cortland Sutton of the two. So I do agree with Drew that Waddle will fall in mid-tier wide receiver 2 for me. Because if you look last year, all the major categories we care about, mainly yards per route run, targets per route run, target share, just for a few examples, Waddle pretty easily and clearly topped and trumped Cortland Sutton in those categories. But I think using the word value is perfect. So I'm not paying up for either of these guys. I'm very much in a Waddle. But I'm perfectly content with waiting 2 or 3 rounds if it takes that and going with Cortland Sutton.
Now, I don't know, as we need to finish up our redraft rankings, as we will be discussing that towards the end of the show, what we're doing with that. But I, based off of last year, was really impressed with what we saw from Pat Bryant in limited usage when Troy Franklin was out due to injury. Troy Franklin, for me, I feel like goes down the pecking order actually behind Bryant. But even then, now with this acquisition by the Denver Broncos, do both of these wide receivers, Drew, they just fall off the redraft radar or just go straight into dynasty mode? Or are you kind of holding out hope for one of those two guys to emerge as a wide receiver 3 in this offense?
Not so much for this year. I do still have hope that maybe Pat Bryant can become a thing after Cortland Sutton moves on, but Marvin Mims is dead to me completely. I think Pat Bryant could have his games this year, like a spike game here or there, but it's not. I don't think it's anything that we'll be able to consistently depend on. But from the dynasty lens, I'm still okay stashing Pat Bryant.
All right. Aiden, let's keep it going with you. News the other day: Justin Fields traded to the Kansas City Chiefs from the New York Jets. For redraft purposes here, Pat Mahomes tore his ACL towards the end of last year. Now, I say this with the implication that, well, it's going to be at least halfway through when Mahomes returns. I think we've all seen modern medicine work a few miracles here where some people come back from injury earlier than that. But let's just say, for argument's sake, that it's a few weeks into the season before we see Patrick Mahomes here. Are you entertaining the notion that Justin Fields, in the latter rounds of your drafts for redraft purposes is still a value, or are you just leaving him on waivers and letting somebody else deal with it?
Yeah, so to your point, Jorge, I do fully expect Fields to be the starter for the Chiefs at QB position for the first 4 or 5 weeks. So Mahomes is on PUP specifically. And this is very personal for me because I was burned by Fields so bad last year. I had an irresponsible amount of Fields. I think everyone did. Well, Drew, it sounds like you might have as well. So, way too much. So I've been burned a couple years before, specifically last year. We always talk about elite rushing for fantasy, And yeah, you can invest in you should rather invest in elite rushing. But when the passing numbers are so bleak and the passing ability is just so, horrible for lack of a better term, I'm going to stay away, even if it is late. I've been burned by this too many times last year. Unfortunately, I do want to stay away from Justin Fields. Pains me to say it, but the passing is so bad where it kind of overshadows a rushing upside for me.
Drew, do you think that the mere association with Andy Reid is going to, for some reason, drive up Fields' value, that you could kind of take advantage of that during your drafts this August?
I would hope that's not the case. I know it'll be tempting because it's the Chiefs and it's Andy Reid, but I think we've seen enough Justin Fields at this point to know who he is, and I just, even as a late round quarterback, I have to think there are going to be much better options that not only will probably have a better floor than Fields, but you also know that you're going to get more than just a handful of games out of them too. So it's like whenever I'm drafting a late round quarterback, even though I'm kind of going into it with the mindset of I'm probably going to end up having to stream the position, the main goal is still to try to find a guy that is a late round quarterback, but is somebody that you hit on that can be a starter for the entire season, like Jaden Daniel was his rookie year, like Drake May
Malik
was
Willis.
last season. Yeah, Malik Willis. I would rather take Malik Willis over Justin Fields. Like with Fields, best case scenario, you get a few good weeks and then you have to drop him anyway. Whereas there's going to be other guys you can draft later where they have similar upside, but they're also going to be a starter much more long term. So I think it's as tempting as Justin Fields and his rushing upside can be. I think it's best to just stay away.
Yeah, don't touch it. Yeah, I agree.
All right, Drew, let's stay with you here. News or noise question. Is this significant news or is this just background noise? Hollywood Brown signing with the Philadelphia Eagles. Is this a move that could maybe signal A.J. Brown maybe out the door, or is it depth? Like, how hyped are you about this news, or do you think it's just all noise?
Not hyped at all. I think it is just a depth signing. I don't think the Eagles are any more likely to trade AJ Brown than they already were before they brought in Hollywood Brown. Like, I don't think that signing is going to influence their thinking one way or the other. He will become a little bit more interesting if they do trade AJ Brown and they don't bring anybody else in. But it's I don't think it's anything we should be going super crazy about. And I don't think it's anything that the Eagles are making AJ Brown related decisions off of.
All right. For our last bit of news and notes here, this is a signing for the Eagles that I actually think we all should be pretty excited about, because I'm excited about this. I thought this was the best place he could go to in free agency, referring to Dallas Goedert going back to the Eagles on a 1-year deal. Aiden, yes or no, this was the best landing spot he could have found himself in free agency?
Yes, it absolutely was. And if you don't mind, I want to elaborate on why.
Go for it. Yeah.
A minute here. It absolutely was because of the fact of he's been a pretty high level target earner, but also I think there's more to be had there, if you would. I expect AJ Brown to be out the door, and I expect Dallas Goedert, to be the immediate number 2 option in that passing game. And who knows? The tush push didn't work nearly as well last year as in years past. Maybe they're not as run heavy with Nick Sirianni's job on the line and the new offense coordinator, Sean Mannion. There's a lot of factors where I think Dallas Goedert could be the number 2 option. And people are going to say, oh, he's a boring veteran. We're going to have dynasty brain. Oh, rookie fever, young guy, blah, blah. But you look up and everyone was overlooking Dallas Goedert last summer. And to an extent, I was as well. But then he had a career high in receptions and a career high in touchdowns, 11 to be exact. So I think Dallas Goedert will continue to become a veteran value, and there's more targets to be had now with A.J. Brown very likely out the door.
For me, before we get to Drew, your thoughts here, you mentioned something that I think is very important here. People are going to be looking at the 11 touchdowns that he had last year, PPR scoring 12.3 points per game. Well, let's go back the past few seasons. In 2024, 2 touchdowns, 10.4 points per game. 3 touchdowns in 2023, 9.7. 3 touchdowns in 2022, 11.8. So I think his value is completely insulated this year with the Philadelphia Eagles because he's consistent across the board. Like this 11 touchdown thing, that was a huge outlier. But even though it was an outlier, it wasn't like you saw one massive year of production due to the touchdowns. Like you've seen consistency from him from year in, year out. And to Aiden's point, maybe it's not a question of if, but when they move on from AJ Brown this offseason, I think assuming that they don't draft an elite wide receiver in this draft, he's immediately the number 2 target in this passing game. Do you agree with all those statements, or is there something you may want to push back on when it comes to Dallas Goedert, Drew?
No, I think that's spot on. I definitely think his fantasy outlook will be very much so on the up and up if and when AJ Brown gets moved. Obviously, if that ends up not happening, then maybe there would have been an option that would have been better in free agency where he could have been the second option. But if he ends up being the second option in Philly, somewhere with that he's familiar, Jalen Hurts is familiar with him, I do think that could very well end up being best case scenario for Goddard this offseason.
Definitely.
Nice. All right, well, let's get into talking about some of the free agent signings at the running back position and our thoughts of how that will impact these players from a redraft perspective. So, Aiden, let's kick it off with you. One of the I want to say those interesting situations here with Kenneth Walker, Super Bowl MVP. Signs a 3-year, $43 million deal with the Kansas City Chiefs. Let's just get into it. What do you think his ceiling is for fantasy purposes? Not the full, not the well, I guess we could do both. Let's talk about ceiling and floor. Let's talk about the ceiling first, as him as the lead back in Kansas City, and where do you early on, where do you think you would rank him? Don't have to give me a firm number now. We'll discuss that in later episodes, but. Where do you see his value in terms of ranking, as well as what you could see as upside in this offense?
Yeah, Jorge, you kind of snuck it in when we were talking about this last week, like you, JT, and I, our initial reaction from a dynasty perspective. The Chiefs haven't had an explosive running back like this since Kareem Hunt's rookie year in 2017. So 8 or 9 years ago, we're looking at seasons around there. After that, they just patchwork and work through CEH. Work through Isaiah Pacheco, work through corpse of Kareem Hunt, and bring him back. But as long as it's not like a top 6 to 8 running back and you're getting out of hand, my mentality is there's no such thing as too high on Kenneth Walker. That's basically what I'm going to be operating this offseason. So I do have an exact number for you right now because I did update initial run through after free and save my redraft rankings for 2026 the other day. I have him RB13 right now, so that's literally as high of a precipice as you can get as a low-end RB1. I could see me moving into the low-end, back-end RB1 range, maybe even 2 or 3 spots higher, if the Chiefs just add a couple more offensive line pieces. I know that we've been waiting for 3 or 4 years, his entire 4-year career, basically. We want him to be a bell cow. Kenneth Walker, as explosive as they come, top 5 in explosive run rate among qualifying running backs last year in that category, and he gets them down there, but then the Seahawks annoyingly and frustratingly for fantasy managers everywhere pulling for Zach Charbonnet. Sure, you could have said that the Seahawks could have re-signed him because of no Charbonnet, but we have the dream landing spot here for the Chiefs. I have my RB13 right now, but I see legit RB9, 10 upside if we're talking true ceiling. In terms of floor, I don't think he finishes any lower than high-end RB2 this season, 2026, just because of the bell cow usage and the explosiveness as a whole of the player. So I am over the moon about this, as you can tell.
No, it makes a lot of sense. You look at the running backs for the Kansas City Chiefs last year, like not one really blew the door off in terms of being able to have that explosiveness to their running game. I will say this is a great spot for Kenneth Walker for many reasons, but one of which is that when it comes to rushing concepts, the Chiefs employed zone rushing concepts over 50% of the time whenever they were running the ball. And Kenneth Walker in those same type of environments there was averaging 5.2 yards per carry. So if there was ever an offense that could set him up for success on multiple levels, this is a big one. Drew, let's talk about the latest Achan in the NFL.
We already went over this.
Travis Etienne, formerly known as the artist, formerly known as Travis Etienne, goes to the New Orleans Saints. 4 years, 52 mil. In PPR scoring, he was, I believe, RB 14, so top 15 in PPR. Do you think that's repeatable in New Orleans this season?
I think top 15 could be. That's probably about as high as I'd be willing to go. I've always been a big Travis Etienne. That's gonna be
It's
really
gonna be a minute,
hard
right?
to say.
Yeah.
Boy,
I'm gonna have to really make it a point to remember to do that. I've always been a big Travis Etienne guy, but I am worried that he could end up being a regression candidate this year. He volumed his way to a really nice fantasy season last year, but like he was 8th in rushing attempts. But then if you look at among at least the running backs that had at least 100 rushing attempts, he was 37th in explosive run percentage, 31 in missed tackles forced per attempt, 34th in yards after contact per attempt. And he was plenty involved in the passing game too. He had 47 targets, but then whenever you look at running backs with at least 30 targets last year, he was 22nd in yards per route run, 15th in yards per reception, 17th in missed tackles forced per reception. But he was 4th in team touchdown percentage. He had 6 receiving touchdowns last year, and then he added another 7 rushing touchdowns. And so, just given how inefficient of a year he had, but the way that the touchdowns came, I think that's going to be a really tough thing to replicate, especially whenever you consider that, at least in my opinion, I think the offensive environment in New Orleans isn't quite as fantasy friendly as the one in Jacksonville. I don't think the gap between the two teams is as large as it was a couple of years ago, but I do think it's at least a step down. So if I look at, him being a workhorse in Jacksonville versus him being a workhorse in New Orleans, I would have preferred him being the workhorse in Jacksonville. And so, unless there's some big improvements from an efficiency standpoint, I think the season he had last year is going to be a tough one to replicate. So I do think he'll be a step down. Like I think in half PPR, I think he was the running back 10 in fantasy points per game. I don't think top 12 is coming again this year, but I could see, just based off the volume I do expect him to see in New Orleans, that he could work his way to another top 15 season. I just think that that's more of a ceiling rather than a likely outcome.
So, I'm glad you brought up how inefficient he was as a rusher, but how efficient he was as a receiver. And I 100% agree. You look at rushing attempts last year in Jacksonville, he had 260. The next closest running back, Michelle Tootin, had 83. So when you get the volume, there's a reason why they say volume is king in fantasy football, because that can cover up a lot, right? The thing I'm thinking about here, though, is they bring back Kamara, whether that's a thing, whether he's going to be on the team next year or not, whether they trade him, But Kamara, the receiving work, if he does stay there, I think is going to stay. So now you're taking away some opportunities, some touches for Etienne. Wow, I almost did that.
Here we go,
man. That's going to be so tough this year. I swear to God. Etienne at the turn. I can't wait
Can you imagine a team like that?
And it works. Watch that work, right? Here's the thing. While his rushing efficiency metrics weren't great, but they weren't horrible. This screams to me like a better situation. Still not great, but a better situation than Rachaad White when he was with the Bucs, where we saw Rachaad White being completely ineffective, basically as a rusher, and got all of his fantasy value from the receiving work that you saw a few seasons ago. This scares me a little bit for redraft a couple seasons from now. But for this season, depending on Kamara's involvement, whether or not he's going to be on the team, I think I agree with you that you could see the upside here. But man, that rushing efficiency needs to get a little bit better before people get too excited about where they're drafting them. Next running back we're going to be talking about, J.K. Dobbins, going back to the Denver Broncos, 2 years, $16 million. I think this is a great signing, and that's coming from an RJ Harvey fan last year who, I needed him to help me propel through the fantasy playoffs. He was giving me that work there. in terms of the fantasy point production. But when you look at when these two guys were playing last year, I mean, however you want to slice it, J.K. Dobbins was doing a far better job in rushing yards per game and yards per carry, and explosive run percentage, and success rate, and missed tackles forced, yards after contact per attempt. So anything that involved a running back making plays and getting extra yardage on plays, as opposed to just getting the reception, ADOT totals and not taking it upfield. Like the guy was just great when compared to RJ Harvey. So I think this is great if you're trying to pick between Dobbins or Harvey. Like you go with Dobbins in this situation. Now, what does this do for his overall fantasy value? That's where things get shaky, right? And now we're talking about, the format that you're playing in fantasy football. So let me pull up his best ball ADP right now because I'm kind of curious. He is currently with Underdog as the RB33. So players that are around him in that ADP, you have, coincidentally, that's funny, Travis Etienne, you got Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, Charbonnet, Warren. Well, obviously Charbonnet is going to be out because of the injury, right? Jalen Warren, you have some competition there with Rico Dowdle, but I'm not writing off Jalen Warren. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, if they address running back in the draft, I think he's going to drop down more. So out of those people in that range, hell yeah, I want to get J.K. Dobbins. Drew, that being the case, are there any reasons why people maybe should be scared off from J.K. Dobbins? Is it injury history, or is that just narrative talk right there?
No, I mean, I do think that has to be a legitimate concern at this point. I mean, I never like to go into a season projecting that somebody's going to get injured or that they're going to miss X amount of games or anything along those lines. But right. I do think it has to be a real concern with Dobbins at this point. But the reality is, man, whenever he's been on the field, he has been an efficient runner. And there's no reason for us to doubt that's not going to be the case again this year. And I mean, considering they were fine bringing Dobbins back, and we saw how this backfield already played out last season whenever they were both healthy. Now, obviously, RJ Harvey is in his second year. He's got some more experience under his belt. Maybe that helps him get some additional playing time, and it doesn't look exactly like it looked at the beginning of last season. But as bad as I wanted to be RJ Harvey, I was an RJ Harvey guy last year whenever he was coming up in the draft. It's hard not to lean toward Dobbins, given how we saw this play out, just a year ago whenever they were both healthy. And so I do think that there's reason to be concerned because of the injury. But if I had to guess, it's that concern's probably going to already be baked into his ADP. I don't think he's going to have like a super skyrocketed ADP. So we'll see if that ends up being the case. But if I had to guess, I'd be willing. I would be willing to bet that the injury concern's already going to be somewhat baked into the ADP anyway. So I'm probably going to be fine taking shots on him.
So for those who are wondering why, the reference to Underdog ADP, which we know that is a best ball ADP, you have to think about how redraft and best ball are kind of tied together. Dynasty minded folk, Dynasty kind of goes out the window, around July, August. People are still year round, doing best balls. But people tend to still have a best ball mindset when it enters redraft season. And so you kind of see data too. Early on, it's like this kind of correlates a little bit to where people are perceiving value until training camp reports, start showing up, until depth charts start being, more solidified. So that is why right now we're going to be going off of Underdog ADP, and it kind of gauges the market, so to speak. Maybe we'll use FFPC if we were talking tight end premium, but we're not doing that tonight, which is why we're sticking with Underdog ADP, which is a half PPR scoring platform. Aiden, I brought up Jalen Warren.
I know I know.
You and I on Dynasty 365 have been going a little bit back and forth with both of these. Well, one a former Pittsburgh Steeler, and the other one a current Pittsburgh Steeler. What do you think about Rico Dowdle signing with the Steelers for a 2-year, $12 million deal. And where do you have these running backs in terms of pecking order in this offense?
Yeah, so real quick, just off the top here, the more and more I think about it, Jorge and Drew, the more and more I love this from a fantasy perspective. Obviously, this isn't just a one-year prove-it deal. We mentioned the numbers, but moving past that, Rico Dowdle, he has the archetype, to me at least, I don't know what you guys think, but he has the archetype and build more of a bell cow back than Jaylen Warren. Now, this might be a hot take, but I feel like fantasy managers for the past 3 years, his entire career for the most part, have been trying to make Jaylen Warren into something he's not. They want him to be a bell cow. We want him to get a lot of the touches. But the fact of the matter is he was out-touched and outplayed by Najee Harris, Kenneth Gainwell, and now very likely Rico Dowdle. Let me paint a picture quick for you. When given the opportunity, Rico Dowdle has emerged himself to be great. Last year, whether it was injury, whether it was just him being disappointing, he flat out benched Chuba Hubbard. But more specifically, I want to bring up 2 years ago in Dallas with the Cowboys when he had the full workload, when they finally benched Zeke with Mike McCarthy, by the way, no less. He had over 1,000 yards there as well. Aaron Rodgers likely stiff-arming retirement at least for one final year with Mike McCarthy. And at this point in his career, by no means do you want Aaron Rodgers slinging it all over the place. So they're very likely going to be a very run-heavy offense. Listen, I think Jaylen Warren is a good real-life player. But for fantasy purposes, I think we just have to realize that he's a nice change of pace back. And nothing more. So I like Rico Dowdle as the projected workhorse here in a for all intents and purposes, a projected run-heavy offense. End of monologue. That's just my theory in the Steelers' backfield right now.
Interesting. You're wrong. Let me tell you why. Because
I knew you were going to say that.
you mentioned you don't want Aaron Rodgers slinging if he comes back, right? Which, by the way, I don't get that. First of all, because
he makes him wait.
No. Let's start from like the broader ideas and work our way into the more specific ones. Yeah. Last I checked, Aaron Rodgers was the reason that Mike McCarthy got fired in Green Bay. Like they had clashing chemistries. So I don't know what the Steelers were thinking. Ooh, let's find a way to entice Aaron Rodgers to play one more year in Pittsburgh. Let's go get him the head coach that he doesn't like playing for. That's going to work. Fantastic. Okay, that notwithstanding, you mentioned you don't want to see Aaron Rodgers slinging the ball. Well, you have DK Metcalf, who requires the ball to be slung down the field his way. You just traded for Michael Pittman, who also requires the ball to be slung down the field that way. So if he's not going to be slinging the ball downfield and they don't want him slinging the ball downfield, well, then they're going to have to throw the short to intermediate game, which is what Jaylen Warren had success with, along with Kenneth Gainwell last year. So I don't think he is going to be written off by any stretch of the imagination. When the Rico Dowdle signing happened, I viewed this as a lateral move from what he had in Carolina. Like, eventually Chuba Hubbard, you see that his touches eat into Dowdle after Dowdle went on that hot,
2 games
spree. Yeah, exactly, the 2 games. But you go to Underdog ADP, Rico Dowdle, currently the RB 58, Jaylen Warren, the RB 30. Drew, that is a huge gap. Do you think that for redraft purposes, is that warranted? Or do you think that Dowdle's getting the wrong end of the stick here?
Run that by me one more time. What was
I was going to say.
Yeah, so Dowdle's current ADP in Underdog is running back 58. This is Dowdle, okay? Jaylen Warren is the running back 30.
I have to imagine as the market starts to react to the free agency signing that that gap has to close. Like I do think Jaylen Warren is going to be the lead guy in Pittsburgh, but I don't think the gap is going to be that big in their ADP. I think that's probably just more so there not being enough data post free agency yet, not enough drafts post free agency to make up where his value was pre-free agency whenever we didn't know where he was going. But I do still think Jaylen Warren's the guy. I do agree with you on that, Jorge, but I don't think the gap between those guys should be that big. And once we get closer to redraft season, I don't think the gap between those two will be that big at all.
So, Drew, going to our next running back here, for people who are maybe new to Fourth and Frames and new to us, Drew and I, we like numbers. We like math.
Yes,
things like that make sense. And then from there, we can extrapolate outward, but they help us get an idea, help us zero in on a situation or a trend or something that makes us go, this is the player. Okay. This situation we're about to talk about, there's a whole lot of math. There's a whole lot of numbers. And I don't know about you, Drew. I don't know what to make of all this, number vomit, because we got a lot of that with the Arizona Cardinals, with them signing Tyler Algier for the Atlanta Falcons, 2 years, $12 million a day. It feels after they reworked James Conner's contract. You still have Trey Benson. I think they also just brought back Bam Knight. Also, if I remember serves me correctly.
Oh, they did.
So it's like you have all these metrics for all these running backs that played under all sorts of different injury scenarios, and now you bring in Tyler Algier, and there are reports like he's going to be the lead guy. We don't know, like this and that. It's like so many uncertainties for a running back who, prior to Bijan Robinson getting drafted, he did have 1,000 yards. I believe it was his rookie season.
Yeah, his rookie season.
So we've seen that there is the ability, and we've seen that he is able to, for fantasy purposes, have some value. But man, to go to to go to a situation in Atlanta where you knew at least what his role was going to be, to now you go to a situation where the incumbents at the running back position are all there who aren't knocking the doors off of anybody, but the fact that they're still in consideration, that has to scare you a little bit. Or am I overreacting? And Drew, you're going to tell me, no, we're good. It's Tyler Algier's job. Like, don't worry about it.
I do think it could end up being a pretty complicated committee, at least to start out. I do expect Algier to be the lead back in the committee. He would be the one that I think should have the highest ADP, that I think should be coming off the board first in fantasy drafts. James Conner, I don't have a lot of bad things to say about James Conner. He's always been a really solid running back whenever he's been healthy. But
Yes.
that health part has been a problem, and he's coming back from a nasty foot injury. I think he turns 31 during the season this year. Like, it's not exactly like things are trending up for him necessarily. I mean, he had to take a pay cut just to be able to stay in Arizona in the first place. But and Trey Benson, he has his own injury concerns and issues and things like that. But he was a decently efficient runner with the opportunities he got last year. I think his efficiency numbers were actually better than Algier's. But I think Algier is going to end up being the most dependable option in this backfield as the season goes on. And the reality is it's the option that this current coaching staff has invested the most in. Like, Connor had to take a pay cut to stay. Trey Benson was not drafted by this coaching staff. I know the second round draft capital, I believe is what it was solid at the time, but like this coaching staff has no connection to that. And so I do think Algier will be the guy that we'll want in the backfield. But I could be one of those things where it gets off to a slow start. But I think that I haven't finished my draft rankings for this year yet. That's, we're going to get into those over the next few weeks. But if I had to guess right now, I think he'll probably be like a back end RB2 for me. I think inside the top 24 running backs is well within the range of outcomes for Algier if he does end up being the lead guy in this offense. And so I'll probably have him somewhere between running back 20, running back 30 in that area, but he will be the highest ranked Cardinals running back for me for sure.
All right. Let's cruise through some of these running backs now and let's get to the wide receiver position. So Chris Rodriguez signing 2 years, $10 million deal. Jaguars, former Washington Commander. The question here is, everyone's been talking about Bashal Tutin, ever since Travis Etienne moved to New Orleans.
Drew's been talking about Bashal too.
The question here is, for redraft purposes, is Rodriguez going to end up being the better value? Yeah, I think he's going to be the better value. If you're drafting early, I don't think he's going to be the better value when we're talking about the second week in August, because I fully anticipate him being the RB1 for the Jacksonville Jaguars. When you look at explosive run percentage, when you look at missed tackles forced per attempt, you talk about yards after contact per attempt, the dude generates yards and has that explosive potential that, compared to Michelle Tootin last year, granted, limited snaps, right? Like, it leaves him in the dust. Like, it's not even close. And the fact is, if this Jaguars offense, which is maintaining consistency, they're keeping their coaches, not regime changing, nothing that muddies the water here. If they were so sold on Tootin and LaQuinton Allen, why would you give somebody a 2-year deal versus a 1-year prove-it deal in free agency? Some will say that this will maybe a competition. I personally think this is no competition. I think this is Chris Rodriguez's job to lose heading into redraft season. Remember, serves it correctly, he is a Kentucky running back. Drew, you're a Kentucky guy.
I am.
You keeping the Kentucky loyalty here, or are you not on board here?
No, man, I'm still a Bashaw Tootin guy. I love
short answer.
I love Chris Rodriguez. I do, and I do think that he is a very underrated running back. But I think Bashaw Tootin is going to be the guy here. Now, I don't know if I'm going to love Bashaw Tootin's ADP. I don't know if I'm going to be in at that standpoint. We'll have to see where that ends up shaking out at. Because I do think that it will be a committee. I don't think that Bashaw Tootin is going to be like 80% of the touches running back or anything along those lines. But like he was already the red zone running back last year, even over Etienne in a lot of scenarios, and he was really good in that in that role. And I really liked his college profile, and he didn't get a ton of opportunities last year, but I do think the opportunities he got, I thought he looked solid, and I do expect him to get more opportunities coming into the year. And I just think he's the more explosive player. I think he's the one that has more upside. I think that Chris Rodriguez will be a fine later pick if you take some risk at the running back position early in the drafts and you want like a rock solid guy to on the back end to kind of make that position a little bit more safer. But I think Tootin is the one that could be a potential league winner. And I don't think Chris Rodriguez has that kind of upside. All
right, let's get into our next running backs. Real quick analysis here. Aiden, let's start with you. Kenneth Gainwell.
I'll remove myself.
No. You stay there. Kenneth Gainwell, Buccaneers, 2 years, $14 million deal. You know I'm pretty high on this situation. They brought back Sean Tucker. Yes or no? Is he worth the RB17 ADP that he's currently at?
Oh my God. I've warmed up to the idea about RB17. That's still very high for me. So no, he's not worth that high of an ADP right now.
Conversely, the running back that he is now replacing in Tampa Bay is now with my Washington Commanders. Rachaad White signs a 1-year, $2 million deal. Look, Jeremiah Love has been linked to being a Commanders pick since they went heavy in free agency on the defensive side of the ball. Kyle Zeigler, I know you're watching. I hope your Titans mess it up again in the draft and don't take Jeremiah Love.
Have him call in.
And then have it fall to the Commanders. But maybe there's some competency there. They're already making great decisions as an organization with those jerseys. Love those. But Drew, let's say Jeremiah Love doesn't land here. Is Rachaad White the only running back you want with a backfield with JCM and Jerome Ford and Jeremy McNichols now?
If I'm being honest, I have absolutely no idea what to make of this backfield. But the answer I'm probably going to end up leaning toward is whoever ends up being cheaper between Rachaad White or Ja'Cory Cross-Merritt. I think those are the two guys that are going to make up the majority of the touches. I'm not really worried about Jerome Ford or Jeremy McNichols playing huge roles in this backfield. I do think it'll be if there is no Jeremiah Love, or if they don't invest in like a day two running back, anything like that. If the backfield ends up looking like this, I think it's going to be a mix of JCM and Rachaad White, and so I'll probably just end up taking shots on whoever's cheaper between those two guys.
All right, let's go to wide receivers. Aiden, I know you'll want to talk about this because this is now your guy. But for brevity's sake, let's just cut the crap and get to it. DJ Moore, go Terps, goes from the Bears to the Bills via trade. By default, becomes Josh Allen's new number one receiving option.
Correct. Yeah.
Where do you have him currently? You said you did redraft rankings earlier, first set of rankings. Where does he fall as far as like a top 12, top 24, maybe even more than that? Like, where does he fall for you?
Yeah. So in the middle of that, kind of like, let's see, I'm trying to do that. Low end wide receiver 2 here. Just, I'll give you exact in a minute, but if I may, we're walking into at least 100, if not 110 plus targets. So because of that, because of how pass happy Josh Allen is on a weekly basis, I have DJ Moore right now. This may be a tad aggressive to some people, but I think this is set up for a monster target scenario. Wide receiver 23 as it stands right now.
So I'm not going to call you biased being a Bills. I'm just messing with you. I'm with you. Let me ask you a question real quickly. And I know we'll get to the next wide receiver here quickly. Who at the end of the day, seasons from now, who will be the better Maryland wide receiver to play with Josh Allen? Diggs or Moore?
Like over this, so they're both going to play the same stretch. Diggs was on a 4-year deal. Moore's on a 4-year deal.
Yeah,
so they're both going to play 4 year with the Bills.
Who will have scored more fantasy points?
Yeah.
After that 4-year window.
I think I'm going to go with Stefon Diggs because Stefon Diggs at one point was just walking out and having 3 touchdowns for a stretch on a weekly basis. So I'm going to go Stefon Diggs, although I really do like DJ Moore addition, but I'm going to go Diggs for that perspective.
All right, well, let's ask Drew here. What does he think about this wide receiver going from the Colts to the Steelers? Michael Pittman Jr. brought him up briefly. Man, I mean, from my perspective, I see Pittman, I see Metcalf, and I see who's the quarterback who's going to be throwing the ball downfield to them on a consistent basis. And if it's going to be just one or the other, how are you comparing these two, Metcalf and Pittman?
I think Metcalf will still have higher than Pittman, but I will say if Aaron Rodgers does end up coming back to Pittsburgh for another year, I do think that Michael Pittman seems like the type of receiver that Rodgers would just fall in love with. Like he's just such a strong fundamental receiver, a strong route runner, good hands, reliable. Like I think that he has a lot of qualities that DK Metcalf just doesn't, but he doesn't have the explosiveness that Metcalf has either. But he to me, he seems like a guy that Rodgers could end up wanting to pepper with targets. And it would not shock me a single bit if he ends up out targeting DK Metcalf if Rodgers does come back. And so I do think that there is some upside there with Pittman. I think that he's always been an underrated receiver. And so if we can have any kind of confidence in the quarterback play, whoever ends up being in Pittsburgh, I could definitely see a world where Pittman ends up being a value in drafts this year.
Drew, hold on. Drew, let's stick with you and go and talk about the best ball ADP of wide receiver 36 for Underdog, who just re-signed with the Indianapolis Colts on a 4-year, $114 million deal. You talk about peppering with targets. Alec Pierce, top 36. You think that's warranted?
Yeah. I think that's fair. That's a price that I could definitely be in on if that ends up sticking. And I'm honestly, I've never really been that big of an Alec Pierce guy. I'm still really not that big of an Alec Pierce guy. But like whenever you consider the fact Michael Pittman we just talked about, he pulled in a 20% target share last season. Like he had a strong year, especially to start the year. And I don't expect Pierce to absorb all of those vacated targets, but I do think he will be more of a focal point in the offense. I mean, we saw last year. He was a top 15 receiver 5 different times over the last 9 weeks of the season. That does count week 18 that we don't care about for fantasy football purposes. But nonetheless, I mean, he still had his games where he disappeared, but he was extremely productive down that stretch. And so given the fact that he ended up finishing as the wide receiver 35 in points per game last year, and now you're telling me that his ADP is wide receiver 36, I do expect him to have some type of small jump forward. And so, whenever the ADP is lining up with his last year's finish, I think that is more than a fair price. And I don't know what it's going to look like with Daniel Jones and the Achilles injury, and they're saying that he's going to be back to start the year, but I don't know if he's going to be able to push the ball down the field like Pierce needs to have those big games that he has with the way that he does stretch the field. I don't know what that's going to look like, and I do think that that's concerning, but you have to think with Pittman not being there now and with Pierce getting this contract that even though I don't expect him to start leading the league in targets, I would have to think that those numbers are going to start going up at least somewhat. And so, yeah, if that ADP sticks, I'm on board with that.
All right, let's talk about the next wide receiver who I loved this landing spot. I was hoping for this landing spot. It happened. Before we get to that, Brandon, you got a question in here. Let's throw that up on screen. He says Colts drafting Cole Payton just to say they drafted a quarterback named Payton. That's funny. That's good. Love that.
Got to do shit, dude.
Wan'Dale Robinson, Tennessee Titans, 4 years, $70 million. Reunites with Brian Daboll, who's the new offensive coordinator there for the Tennessee Titans. Wide receiver 21 points per game, was the Giants' number one wide receiver with no Malik Neighbors. And to be honest with you, the second I heard that the Titans were bringing back or restructuring the deal for Calvin Ridley, I'm like, yeah, he's going to be the top receiving option for the Titans this year because no Okonkwo, Gunnar Helm. We'll see. I never want to write off somebody, but like you're a far cry from being a primary receiving option. And what I really liked about Wan'Dale Robinson is, for years he was the PPR darling. Like he's gonna get you targets. Now, he may not catch a lot of them, and the reception total is going to be disproportional to the target volume, but the receptions will add up because of the volume. Well, he's going to get that, with Cam Ward here in Tennessee. And last year, we saw him actually have a higher average depth of target. You saw him being more of a threat down the field. So we actually saw an increase to the versatility in his game. And given the fact that the outside receiving options are not currently good there for the Titans, I think the short to intermediate passing game is where he's going to thrive, which is where he thrived under Brian Daboll with New York. So definitely excited there. Aiden, let's go back to you. Let's talk about your real favorite team, and it's okay. You can tell the rest of Bills Mafia. The New England Patriots, Romeo Doubs. Shout out, Jim. Exactly. Romeo Doubs, New England Patriots, 4 years, $68 million. What do you think his value is with Drake May in 2026?
Yeah, you kind of mentioned it here, but I'm a diehard Bills fan, honestly, so I hate how much I love this from a fantasy perspective. But no, in all seriousness, this is the locked and loaded wide receiver one for the Patriots, right? Now, if they trade for AJ Brown before the draft within the next month or so, give or take, obviously we're going to have to change our perspective and purview here. But that hasn't happened yet. And I think we're walking into – this might be aggressive, about 90 to 100 targets, like max for Rome. Is leaving behind exactly 100 on the dot, exactly vacated targets last season. So that's a lot of areas for Romeo Doubs to work at all areas of the field. His contested catch numbers, his separation metrics downfield are off the charts. Very fantasy-friendly wide receiver. He's finally getting away from that dreaded Green Bay Packers wide receiver rotation type annoying situation there. And you look at what the Patriots did with Kayshon Boutte. He had a surprisingly very high amount of targets as well. And I think Romeo Doubs is just a much better version of Boutte in terms of skill set and downfield projection to this offense. So I don't know where you guys are at, but I'm very excited. And if I'm very running back heavy in drafts and kind of like, I'm not saying this is me personally, but like if anyone out there is running back heavy in drafts early and then likes to wait on wide receiver, I think Romeo Doubs fits that criteria perfectly this summer when drafts roll around.
It is pronounced Boutte, not Booty. Okay, you have to throw the Tay in there.
I thought it was Boutte at first, and then he said it was Booty, and now it's back.
He's wrong.
These names are
We're
confusing.
right.
He's wrong.
Boutte. Okay.
Like A-Chain all over again.
Exactly. Let's do a little game here with the quarterbacks here in free agency. We got Malik Willis going to the Dolphins, 3 years, $67.5 million. We got Kyler. So, he's obviously jumping in to the QB1 role there, although he doesn't have anybody to play with besides Devon Achane, and that might change pretty soon. You have Kyler Murray going on a one-year deal to the Minnesota Vikings, where you're here with, Kevin O'Connell, who helped turn around Sam Darnold. Then we got Tua Tagovailoa, who goes to the Falcons, and I think maybe that kind of tells you what I have to think about Tua Tagovailoa. But Drew, again, looking at these three quarterbacks for redraft purposes this year, if you had to pick one, who are you telling fantasy managers to go draft?
The right answer is probably Malik Willis, but I think the guy I want to take shots on is Kyler Murray.
Again.
I'm a sucker for Kyler Murray for fantasy purposes. I don't think he's that great of a real life NFL quarterback, but we've certainly seen plenty more stretches of good quarterback play from Kyler Murray than we ever have from Malik Willis. And I don't, in terms of the offensive environments the two are in, I don't think it's remotely close between the two. I think it's very clear that Kyler Murray, given the fact that he'll be coached by Kevin O'Connell and the weapons that'll be at his disposal, obviously I think that is a much more fantasy friendly environment as far as that goes. And both guys obviously can use their legs. And so, give me the guy that he's got 4 top 12 quarterback seasons under his belt. Granted, 3 of those were in the first 3 seasons of his career. And so, it's not much for the what have you done for me lately crowd. But I could very easily see a bounce back for Kyler Murray in Minnesota with Kevin O'Connell calling the shots and the weapons that he has there. And then it seemed like that he was past some of the injuries last year whenever he was out there on the field. It seemed like he was moving around well. So give me some shots on Kyler. Yeah.
Let's quickly pivot to Aiden's favorite position, the tight end position. Aiden, okay, first of all, who was it that put together the show sheet? Drew, was it you?
It was me.
Yeah. Giving me Kate Otten to discuss about F you, buddy. All right. Thank you. All right.
Who cares about Kate Otten? He gave you the worst one.
You gave me the worst goddamn tight end to talk about tonight. So thank you for that. But Aiden, Isaiah Likely, 3 years, $40 million goes to the Giants. Chigo Okonkwo, 3 years, $30 million goes to the Commanders. Travis Kelce resigns on a 1-year, $12 million deal. Kate Otten, Buccaneers, 3 years, $30 million deal. Yeah, if you had to rank these tight ends as people that you would take in fantasy for redraft, 1 through 5, what are they? Go.
Can you rattle them off again for me real quick?
Likely, Okonkwo, Otten, Kelce.
Oh, okay.
4 tight ends, sorry.
No, that's what I got. Anyway, moving past that. 4th is easily Otten in Jorge. You kind
he is?
No,
stop it.
And then number 1.
Killing Drew over there.
And then number 3 is Travis Kelce. I think the real debate is flipping between 1 and 2, between Likely the Giants, the Concord of your Commanders, Jorge.
Yeah.
I think this is very much considered a huge hot take right now because of all the chatter I've seen online and social media and such. But for outlook purposes, I'm taking Chigo Okonkwo at number 1. We've discussed how overhyped this Isaiah Likely situation is about to get. Shout out Andrew Cooper of Fantasy Alarm. He always talks about you want tight ends in fantasy that are top 2 targets in their offenses.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we had that with Chigo Okonkwo. He's the number 2 target behind Terry McLaurin. And by the way, Terry McLaurin will be 31 in September at the start of the season. So he's not extremely young either. Combining a top 2 target in the offense and Chigo Okonkwo's elite athleticism as evidenced by among qualifying tight ends, ranking number 2 in missed tackles forced per reception last year and number 2 as well in yards after catch per reception. When he gets out in space, he's pretty much unguardable out there. So combining that elite athleticism with Chig with Jaden Daniels' history in his career over the last 2 years with tight ends, he seems to pepper them with targets as well. So I'm going to go Chigo Okonkwo at number 1 over Isaiah Likely, who I'm putting at number 2. I know that's considered a hot take, maybe not with you guys, but for the fantasy community at large. But I'm okay with saying it. So
I love everything about that. Still screw you, Drew, for giving me Kate Otten. Anywho,
that was purposeful. That was.
I bet it was, and I'm going to be very mindful of that going forward.
Make him talk about some horrible player that
I can't wait to talk about Chris Rodriguez taking the #1 role there in Jacksonville and then bashing Vishal Tootin.
Make him talk about Zamir White next week or something.
Ooh, that's too
Is he still in the league?
That's too low. Come on.
Yes, somehow.
I'm not that cruel. But anyhow, folks, that's going to wrap it up for our very first episode of 2026, excuse me, here on Fourth and Frames. Aiden, it is always a pleasure talking shop with you. Drew, man, it's great to see you behind the redraft lens. It's great to talk some redrafts, some free agency fallout. We understand. Everyone's in dynasty mode. Everybody's in rookie mode. But let me tell you, okay, redraft mode will come around very quickly, and you want to get ahead of the curve before everybody else starts paying attention, which is why you should be tuning into Fourth and Frames.
This is the real research time.
Damn right. Every single week, 10 p.m. Eastern. If you can't catch us live, you can check us out in podcast form Thursday mornings. You can go back to our YouTube channel, which you haven't already. Go there, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you're notified when Fantasy and Frames drops more of our podcast episodes and informative YouTube shorts. And we got a lot of things planned here at Fantasy and Frames. We got a lot of things planned for Fourth and Frames. And speaking of plans for Fourth and Frames, next week, 10 p.m. Eastern, on our YouTube, on our Twitter, on our Facebook. Yes, we still like Facebook. You know what? Facebook has like the largest social media platform. They're the largest social media. Like somebody's going to pay attention. All right. So now
bring MySpace back too while you're at it.
They should bring MySpace back. That would be awesome.
That'd be cool.
Next week on Fourth and Frames, we're going to be doing our early quarterback rankings here. So we're going to be diving into that. Aiden, you mentioned that you did your first run of redraft rankings. I'll put those on the site by the end of the week so people can start taking a look at that. But yeah, no, we got a lot of stuff going on here, Fourth and Frames, whether it's IDP, Dynasty, redraft content, free agency, Fallout talk, just a lot of things going on here. And it's great to be back with you all talking shop. So before we get out of here, any parting words? Aiden, let's start with you.
Yeah. So first of all, you can follow me on Twitter as always at AWineGunner13. I'm always having instant football /fantasy takes over there as well. And I've been pumping out these breaking news articles, all the guys we talked about tonight. If you want my true unfiltered instant reaction mere hours after it happened up on the site, that you can check those out. In fact, I believe that tomorrow morning, we'll be dropping my Jalen Waddle trade to the Broncos reaction. We touched on the beginning, but I go into it more in full scope, in full detail, and just know that a lot of fun stuff cooking up here behind the scenes as we talk about Dynasty 365 and Dynasty articles going forward as a whole.
Drew, what's going on, brother? What do you got going on?
Just look excited, glad to be back here on the show. Excited to start talking redraft rankings and early look at those next week. I will have a dynasty value wide receiver article coming. It's in the works right now. Hope to have it done by this weekend. So should have that coming in the near future. Spoiler alert, there's probably going to be something for the coke heads among us to get excited about.
You're one of them.
Aren't we all though, Aiden? Come on.
So that'll be coming, but outside of that, just focusing on being back here on Fourth and Frames and getting ready for redraft season. We've got Scott Fish Bowl drafts will be here before you know it, and that kind of is a big kickoff for redraft season, and so getting a head start, just talking about this stuff now is just going to make us that much sharper whenever those drafts come around. So looking forward to getting to talk some redraft with you guys moving forward.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And don't forget to follow us on all our social media, whether it's TikTok, Instagram. Been posting to the gram a little bit more lately. Been getting a lot of reviews there. Yeah, I need to go scrub myself off with I'm trying to be hip right there. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. We really appreciate all your support. Absolutely. One thing I did want to bring up, and it's super important because, tomorrow, March 19th, March Madness kicks off. Aiden, who are you picking to win the tournament this year?
I picked real quick, Rip. Sorry, I picked Michigan State. Tom Izzo and Michigan State to win it all over UConn.
Drew, who are you going with?
It's always the Kentucky Wildcats. It makes no difference to me who they're playing, what's going on. It's the Kentucky Wildcats every year. But no, in all seriousness, it's tough between Michigan State and Florida. I'm going to finish my bracket in the morning. I do one bracket and that's it. And so I'm going to finish it in the morning. But it's a tough one to pick, man. It feels very wide open.
And I'm going to betray my Maryland roots because I am a horrible person. But I'm going to take Duke. So that's where I'm going to go.
Well, there is no Maryland, so
UMBC's in it. Mother, you know what? Okay. UMBC's in it. Not College Park, but whatever. Anyhow, Aiden taking shots all night with my basketball love here. Thank you very much. Anyhow, folks, thanks for tuning in. We'll be back next week talking early quarterback rankings. So for Aiden, Drew, I'm Jorge. Y'all take care.